2.5 million rivets. Just think about that number. 2.5 million tiny metal pins holding a massive structure together. It's a giant open-air puzzle consisting of 18,038 individual pieces of iron, each one calculated to a fraction of a millimeter. Now, you might imagine it as a solid wall of metal, but it's actually a precisely engineered lattice. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you the hidden geometry and the violent assembly process that allowed this structure to rise in just 22 months. How did those millions of rivets and 18,000 pieces of iron create something that didn't collapse under its own weight or the wind? The answer, as it turns out, lies in the physics of thermal assembly. The city of stone was about to be interrupted by a skeleton of iron. In 1887, construction began on the banks of the Seine River, where a structure was rising that defied every existing standard of scale. To really get a sense of the magnitude, just look at the skyline of the era. The Washington Monument was the tallest human-built structure at 555 feet, but Eiffel's project was nearly twice its height. It was double the height of the Great Pyramid of Giza and 4 times taller than the towers of Notre Dame. It was a vertical intrusion of unprecedented proportions. Though, and this is the interesting part, its permanence was not guaranteed. The city only granted a permit for the tower to stand for 20 years, meaning it was scheduled to be dismantled by 1909. At that moment, it wasn't a permanent monument. It was a timed experiment in iron. Now, contrary to common belief, the original concept for the Eiffel Tower wasn't actually created by Gustave Eiffel himself. Instead, the vision emerged in 1884 from 2 of his senior engineers, Maurice Coquelin and Émile Nouguier. They sketched a unique metal pylon, 1,000 feet tall, specifically for the World's Fair in Paris. Coquelin described the structure as a great pylon, consisting of 4 lattice girders standing apart at the base and converging at the top, joined by metal trusses at regular intervals. It was a pure engineering marvel, but it lacked a certain visual appeal. To fix this, architect Stephen Salvestre was brought in. He transformed the industrial skeleton into a landmark by adding decorative arcs and public platforms. Salvestre's additions, including monumental arches at the base, glass-walled halls, and stonework pedestals, gave the tower its distinctive bulb-shaped silhouette that made it acceptable to the Parisian public. To understand why the tower stands, you have to look at the metal. Most people assume the Eiffel Tower is made of steel, but it's not. In the 1880s, steel existed, but it was expensive and difficult to produce in the quantities required for a project of this scale. This led to the choice of puddled iron. Gustave Eiffel chose wrought iron because it was affordable, available, and reliable. Unlike cast iron, which has poor tensile strength and is prone to snapping under tension, wrought iron offers high compressive and tensile strength. It's tougher and more flexible. Think of it as the difference between a glass rod and a thick copper wire. Cast iron is strong when you push on it, but if you pull it, it snaps. Wrought iron, on the other hand, can flex and slightly deform without breaking. This flexibility is exactly what allowed the tower to withstand the wind and its own weight without collapsing like a stone structure would under the same stress. Gustave Eiffel didn't start with a blank canvas in Paris. He had a blueprint for success grounded in real-world testing. His experience with the Garabit Viaduct was a critical turning point. Built in 1884, this massive bridge spanned the Truyère River at a height of 400 feet. It was constructed entirely of wrought iron and served as a full-scale beta test for the tower's structural logic. During the assembly of the viaduct, Eiffel used an innovative technique called cantilevering. This allowed his teams to build the arch and the deck from both sides simultaneously, pushing the structure toward the center. It was a masterclass in precision. But the stability of the tower wasn't just about the iron, it was about the joints. The structural strength was heavily influenced by the riveting techniques used in the Statue of Liberty. By the time Eiffel designed the iron skeleton for the Lady in New York, he had perfected the high-pressure joining method that would eventually hold the tower together. Building on the banks of the Seine, Eiffel encountered a problem. The soil was marshy. To reach the bedrock, he used a technique involving pressurized air chambers called caissons. These watertight metal boxes were sunk into the ground and filled with compressed air to keep the water out. It was effective, but it created a dangerous environment. As they dug, workers developed the bends, or Caisson disease, due to rapid decompression. The physical toll was severe. Symptoms included tingling, bleeding, and partial paralysis. This created a risk that the project could be stalled by safety concerns. In April 1887, the Minister of Commerce and Industry descended into the foundations to prove the caissons were safe. His visit was a high-stakes political move to ensure the construction continued without interruption. Everything began at Eiffel's factory in Levallois-Perret. Every single piece of the tower was calculated and drawn with extreme precision, then prefabricated and delivered to the Champ de Mars by horse-drawn carts. Once the pieces arrived, the assembly became a rhythmic, violent process. It wasn't about bolts or screws, it was about rivets. A rivet is essentially a metal pin. To secure the iron beams, Eiffel employed a choreographed four-man team. First, the heater warmed the rivet in a forge until it was red hot. The thrower then tossed the glowing pin through the air to the holder, who caught it and placed it into the pre-drilled hole. Finally, the riveter hammered the head of the pin flat, sealing the beams together. It's a violent, hot process, but the result is a bond that cannot be broken without destroying the metal. To keep this momentum, Eiffel employed 16 of these teams. On average, they installed roughly 1,650 rivets each day. This wasn't a simple assembly line. It was a high-pressure application of metalwork that turned 18,000 pieces of iron into a single monolithic structure. Moving upward, the challenge shifted from the heat of the forge to mechanical precision. Eiffel used mobile steam-powered cranes attached to the legs of the tower to move the massive iron components. These cranes weighed 15 tons, had a lifting capacity of 3 tons, and a range of 12 meters. But as the structure reached the first platform, the real problem was alignment. To level the first platform, Eiffel used a combination of sandboxes and hydraulic jacks. By slowly releasing the sand from the boxes, he could shift the massive weight of the iron with a precision of 1 millimeter. However, the human cost of this precision was high. Eiffel paid his workers more than other Parisian construction sites. Carpenters earned 80 cents an hour, fitters and riveters earned 70 cents, and the laborers, known as mousses, earned 60 cents. Despite the pay, workers went on strike due to the danger of working at extreme heights. Eiffel ended the strike by offering a gradual increase in pay and a 100-franc bonus for those climbing the highest. It was a calculated move to ensure the project stayed on schedule. It's fascinating how the people who claimed to be the protectors of beauty were blinded by the math. While the artistic elite of Paris called the tower a monstrosity, the construction pace shifted into a level of industrial speed that was impossible to ignore. Once the workers' strike ended, the momentum became relentless. The structure grew by more than 3 feet each day, climbing rapidly through the Parisian skyline. By the time the tower reached 557 feet, it had officially become the tallest structure on Earth, leaving the Washington Monument behind. The sheer physics of the assembly proved that mathematical precision could create a landmark that outpaced every other building in the world. Looking at the structure, the secret to its stability is not just the iron, but the geometry. The 4 54-degree inclined pillars provide the base, splaying outward to distribute the weight and the tensile strength of the metal. This tapered shape was designed for optimal wind resistance. Instead of a straight wall of metal, the curvature of the uprights directs the force of the wind and the tower's own weight downward. To prevent the structure from shifting horizontally, Eiffel integrated X-shaped cross braces, which resist horizontal wind force more effectively than single diagonals. This mathematical precision worked. During the Great Storm of 1999, the tower withstood wind speeds of 134 miles per hour, proving that the calculated curves are what actually keep the tower from falling. On March 31, 1889, Gustave Eiffel climbed to the summit and raised the French flag, marking the official opening of the structure. It was the tallest structure in the world at the time, reaching 1,024 feet above ground. This massive assembly of 8,000 tons of iron was not a temporary exhibition piece, but a scientific instrument. By the time you reach the third floor, located 377 feet above the ground, the sheer scale of the engineering is evident. The tower was never meant to stay, but it became a permanent fixture of the global skyline. Its transition from a temporary industrial monument to an icon happened because it proved that a lattice of puddled iron could defy gravity and wind at an unprecedented height. This iron giant stands not as a solid mass, but as a calculated lace of metal. The stability of the structure is found in the 2.5 million rivets that were hammered into place while red hot, and the 18,038 individual pieces of iron that were prefabricated with absolute precision. It is a living machine that breathes with the temperature. As the sun hits the metal, the tower can expand by up to 15 centimeters. This physical fact of thermal expansion and the contraction of millions of red-hot pins is what allows it to survive the wind and the gravity of its own weight. The Eiffel Tower is no longer just a temporary experiment in iron, but a testament to the stability of geometry and the physics of the wind.